Heroes of Civilization. Ambroise Pare. The most outstanding figure in surgery at the beginning of the Renaissance was Ambroise Pare, the uneducated barber's apprentice who later earned for himself the honored title of Father of Modern French Surgery. Pare was born at Laval, Mayenne, in 1510, just 3 years before the Battle of Flodden Field, and he died 16 months after the defeat of the Spanish Armada. As a young man, he went to Paris and spent several years studying and practicing surgery at the IPOD. Later, he was appointed regimental surgeon and took part in that capacity in many battles. In 1541, he married Jeanne Mazelin. After the Peace of Crespy in 1544, Pare was again in Paris, and at the moment we find him dining at the home of the great Jacques Dubois, the teacher of the anatomist Vesalius.
Another glass of port, my dear Pare?
Thank you, Monsieur Dubois. I've never tasted a more excellent wine.
This port was laid down by my grandfather. A most provident and far-seeing man, my grandfather.
I agree with you. Come, let's drink to his memory. Not even in Italy have I tasted a finer wine.
Ah, my friend, if Italy would only return to her vineyards and allow the grass and the poppies to grow on the battlefields. This perpetual state of war can have only one end, annihilation.
For Italy, yes. But for France?
What has war done for France?
War has put her in the front rank of medical and surgical science, my dear Dubois.
Could not our surgeons have gained their knowledge without the experience of war?
Oh, possibly, my friend. But mere knowledge without experience does not give the surgeon much confidence. In days gone by, when wounds were inflicted with cold steel, healing by first intention was thought ideal. But now a change has come.
You allude to the increasing use of firearms, I suppose.
Yes, firearms which impose new tasks and call for new skill from the surgeons. Consider the awful effect of even small arms. You know the caliber of these bullets range up to nearly an inch in diameter.
Good heavens, Pare. They must cause shocking wounds.
Which become infected from the moment they're inflicted. During my 3 years at the Hotel Dieu, I operated upon many patients. But the horrible sights I saw at that hospital were as nothing compared to the disgusting horrors of the battlefield.
You were appointed army surgeon whilst you were at the Hotel Dieu, weren't you, Pare?
Yes, and I accompanied Marshal Montajean and the French troops to Turin. It was there I gained my first experience of gunshot wounds.
What treatment was adopted for these wounds?
Treatment? Torture, you mean? At Vienne, the casualties were enormous. The surgeons were working like galley slaves. They passed from one poor wretch to another, pouring boiling elder oil into their open wounds.
Mon Dieu, what for?
Cauterize the wounds which were supposed to be poisoned from gunpowder.
Who invented such hellish treatment?
Giovanni de Vigo, surgeon in ordinary to the Pope.
And did you?
Well, what else could I do? All the surgeons were agreed that the boiling elder oil was the only treatment for gunshot wounds. But one night, the elder oil ran short. I was left without any. The wounded were being carried into the tents in hundreds, screaming in agony. I was at my wit's end. All I had to alleviate their sufferings was a quantity of salve made from the yolks of eggs, attar of roses, and turpentine.
What did you do?
I saturated lint with the salve and plugged the wounds with it. I could hardly sleep thinking about the men whose wounds I had been unable to cauterize. I expected to find them all dead in the morning.
And were they?
No, thank God. Those whom I had treated with the salve had very little pain in their wounds, no inflammation, and no swelling. They had all passed a comfortable night.
And the others, who had been cauterized by the elder oil?
Were in high fever, their wounds swollen and inflamed, and suffering agonies. I never cauterized again.
I should think not. And regarding the medical organization of the wars?
Organization? There was no organization, my dear Dubois. The king brought his own surgeons and a number of barber surgeons. Unqualified physicians and all sorts of quacks followed the army with dubious ointments and doubtful drugs. Some of the soldiers preferred to look after themselves. And one of their favorite remedies was to mix gunpowder with water and drink it. Another famous recipe for gunshot wounds was to boil in oil of lilies newly born whelps and earthworms prepared with Venetian turtle doves.
Good heavens, what a draught.
You can imagine its curative powers.
Nil. Now tell me, my dear Pare, what payment did you receive for your medical services?
My fees were strange and diverse. On one occasion, I received a cask of wine. Another time, 50 double ducats and a horse. Then a diamond and a collection of crowns and half-crowns. These from the men I did not cauterize. Once the king gave me 300 crowns and a promise.
Of a dukedom?
Nothing so illustrious, my friend. A promise that he'd never see me want.
You have had some very remarkable experiences, Pare. And now, at the age of 31, you are a qualified master surgeon. And your fame as a healer has been sung by thousands of grateful patients throughout France.
I merely dressed their wounds, my dear friend. The good God heals them.
In the years that followed, Pare treated successfully wounds inflicted by sword, halbert, stone, arquebus, pistol, and other weapons. He described and reduced various forms of fractures and also invented many different surgical instruments, as well as artificial limbs and eyes. He was the first surgeon to use ligatures for arteries after amputation. At the moment, we find him bidding farewell to his wife Jeanne prior to setting out on another campaign with the army of France.
You bid me be brave, Ambroise. Brave, when perhaps I shall never see your darling face again. Oh, it's too much to ask of me.
Jeanne, my little one, I love you so. And I would do anything in the world for you.
Then don't leave me, Ambroise. Not this time. There are reasons why.
You mean you...
Yes, my darling. At last the good God has answered my prayers. Now perhaps you can understand why I cannot bear the thought of your going away to the war again. I want you near me today, tomorrow, every day. I'm glad this wonderful blessing has been sent to me, but I'm terribly afraid.
You darling, blessed child. What is there to be afraid of? You're young, healthy. I shall be back long before you really need me. Oh, come. Creep into my arms, my beloved little wife. There. Still feel afraid?
No, darling. With your arms around me, I could face anything.
Oh, that's better. Do you know, I can scarcely believe this wonderful news is true. Why, you're only a little child yourself.
I'm not a child, Ambroise. I'm nearly 22.
Very well. You're not a child. You're an old, old woman.
I'm not an old woman.
You're the sweetest little girl in the world, and I love you. There, does that please you?
Yes.
You're going to be a brave girl. Not worry whilst I'm away.
You are going to the war then, Ambroise?
I must go, my beloved.
I thought you said you loved me.
I worship you, Jeanne. But there are two things that come even before love. One is honor, and the other is duty. And my duty lies amongst the men who fall wounded, fighting for France.
It is now 1580, and we find Pare arraigned before the Medical Council of Paris, where Etienne Gourmelin, the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, condemns him for the use of the ligature after amputation.
And, gentlemen, in conclusion, I say without fair contradiction that Pare's use of a ligature after amputation is a newfangled idea which is vastly inferior to the old established methods of cauterization.
Pare. Gentlemen, in rising to answer the learned dean of the faculty, I must first correct an erroneous statement he has made. The ligature is not a newfangled idea. Galen first used it hundreds of years ago to stop the bleeding of a vessel in a wound, although I am the first surgeon to use a ligature to stop the bleeding after an amputation. And I have had many excellent results from my experiments.
Surgeon, where did you gain your experience, young sir? You, Ambroise Pare, the one-time barber's apprentice, a man who cannot read or write Latin.
Latin was not necessary where I gained my experience, sir. And instead of sitting on a chair poring over books, I did years of practical work in the hospitals of Paris and on the battlefields.
But you must have theory.
Theory against fact, books against patients, talk against work.
Bah, mere field dressing. One of these days, I will give you a lesson in the correct operations of surgery.
Thank you, sir, but I must decline the honor as being unnecessary. When for 3 years I lived inside the hospital of Paris, where I saw and learned most of the works of surgery on sick folk and anatomy on the dead.
But you still need theory.
Instead of which, I had experience by serving under 4 kings of France on the battlefield. I have been in skirmishes, assaults, and the besiegings of towns and fortresses. And I've been shut up in towns with the besieged army and taken charge of the wounded. I have also lived and practiced in Paris. Now will you dare to say you will teach me to perform works of surgery, you who have never yet come out of your study? I pray you, my little master, refrain from teaching your students the use of hot irons after an amputation of limb to staunch the blood, when the ligature is a more sure and easy method and not so fiendish.
And suppose I should refuse to employ this crazy method of yours, this newfangled ligature?
Then the soldiers on whom you use your hellish irons will hold you in such horror for your cruelty that they will rise from their straw and kill you.